Roland Coleman of 5 Parker Circle in Elmira, New York, and Ted Belsky of the American International College Oral History Center. The date is June 21st, 1991, and we're meeting in Mr. Coleman's living room where the conversation is taking place at the request of the Chemung County Historical Society. Mr. Coleman, I want to thank you for making yourself available and appreciate your contribution to our finding out about the development of the black community in Elmira. Mr. Coleman, tell me just a little bit about your family is a longtime resident of Elmira. What was it like for you personally growing up as a young man in Elmira?
Well, we had the neighborhood house that we spent quite a bit of time with, and I had 2 brothers and 1 sister. My sister passed away at an early age, and my 2 brothers are still remaining. I am married to Mildred Coleman. I have 2 sons and a daughter. My 1 son, the oldest son, Roland II, is living in Buffalo. He's an architect. And my other son, Robin, is a construction worker. And I have a daughter who's a freshman at the University of State University in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And we seem to find, I'm very comfortable in Elmira. I know a lot of people. I do have the opportunity of traveling. I get out quite a bit, so I have made some very, very good connections throughout the country. I have a thing called Network, which I use to help young people get jobs and go to school, and it works very well.
I want to pursue that network with you in some depth, but before I ask you about it, would you tell me a little bit about the transition in Elmira that the degree to which, say, employment became open up for blacks, the degree to which the school system generated students that went on to college?
One of the things that's very difficult about the young people, and that unfortunately the generation of today are not that much want to be used as guinea pigs.
Yeah.
They want to see something first. So therefore, Elmira has not been very kind to young graduates of colleges, even both black and white.
Yeah.
So most of your 95% of your educated blacks are working in other fields other than Elmira. Yet, Corning Glass seems to have hired a large percentage of professional blacks from other areas. We have, they are start leaning towards getting
Yep.
local people, because there's about 2 local professionals. Corning is seems to be working towards hiring local blacks,
Sure.
so it makes it very discouraging for young people to go away to school and can't even find a job in their own area,
Sure.
and yet that they're qualified for many things. I have in my networking, I keep track of quite a few of the young fellows, and they're doing quite well.
All right.
I have
Perhaps let's begin with networking then. Would you tell me about how you got it started?
I fortunately was able to do quite a bit of traveling, and places like Seattle, Washington, like California, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Denver, Colorado, Phoenix, Arizona, Atlanta, Georgia, Memphis, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., New York, Philadelphia, and I created some relationships of people that I knew and relatives, and some people that I didn't know, made new acquaintance. And what happened was, the other ladies just asked me about that. How it really started was back, let's see, it had to be 35 years ago. I was at a wedding and in Washington, D.C., and I was conversating with the coach of North Carolina A&T, and I told him I had a young, talented fellow that would really, he was a burner, as we call it.
Yeah.
He
yeah.
played football, basketball, and baseball. And I talked to him for about 2 hours, and I sold him. So he offered a scholarship. One of the amazing parts of the conversation was that, unfortunately, people in this area and up north did not know that much about black schools.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any faith in them. So when I come home with my chest all out saying, I'm going to take care of my main man,
Yeah.
the mother refused to let him go. And we had quite an argument. And that she said that she ain't going to waste her time and then waste his time going to a black school.
Well.
It took many years for people to understand that your great educated blacks of today all went to black schools. I'm not talking about the exceptions where one maybe went to Cornell or one maybe went to Ohio State. I'm talking about the brunt.
Yeah.
And our educated people today. So therefore, now, and because of the lack of communication, we were unaware of what's really happening. We have a magazine called Black Enterprise,
Yeah.
which I use.
Is this a magazine that's published in
No,
Elmira?
New York City.
Okay,
New York City.
tell me about it.
Yeah, Black Enterprise is a magazine that's published in New York by Earl Graves. He's the publisher, and this signals in on black achievements.
Yes.
And what this does is each year they put out the 100 black top businesses, and it's sort of like an encyclopedia on what the blacks are doing. It's not the only magazine, but it's one of the best.
Sure.
And I use that as a stepping stone. And fortunately, I met Mr. Graves at a meeting in New York, and I met him when he was in Elmira.
This is at a meeting of what?
And at the meeting in Elmira was the NAACP 1968 convention. He was Robert Kennedy's front man.
I see.
And when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, he was back in New York, and he just never looked back. He's a millionaire today.
Yeah.
And he's doing very well. In fact, I sent him a letter 3 months ago, and requesting that we take. I said that unfortunately we're up here away from the metropolitan area, and we do not get information about what's really going on. At one time, we received the Pittsburgh Courier, the Chicago Defender, the Amsterdam News, and the Philadelphia News. We get none of that anymore. So our only contact right now is through magazines such as his. And my suggestion was that we take and make a scholarship, a subscription scholarship of 5 years for young students and young people, and that they thought at the time that 5 years might be too much because of the change of address. We're working on maybe a 3-year thing.
Sure. And
to be distributed with the Elks, the Masons, organizations throughout the country. And I feel that would be an asset. Yeah.
Sure. So he is the kind of person that the contacts that you've made throughout the country.
Yeah. One of my main contacts is Mr. Bill Haskins, who was vice president of Urban League, and also Mr. Guy Vickers, who was the executive director of a program called Seek Me, which is in Georgia Tech. And I use these people as research people.
So all of these organizations focus in on creating opportunities for young black graduates, so that when they come up there really is an avenue for their success later on. That sounds. You were involved then, Mr. Coleman, very deeply with the NAACP and the Urban League. Would you tell me a little bit about their activities in Elmira? Say the NAACP.
NAACP, I was president.
Yeah. Do you know about, can you remember about what year?
Yeah, 1975.
All right.
I'll never forget it because it was a turning point in my life.
Is it?
I spent 2 of the hardest years of my life being president. At that time, we had a case against Horseheads for discrimination because a black contractor out of Buffalo there was a petition signed.
Sure.
Mr. Trammell, he's a judge today.
Yeah.
A petition signed not to let him build houses up there. And at that particular time,
please.
At that particular time, it was embarrassing for me because I had to work almost like a cloak and dagger because I couldn't let the information out to my full board. So we worked undercover, and after a year and a half, Judge Burke of Rochester granted, was suing for $1 million, but it wasn't for the money, it was for the right to build.
Yeah.
And then when Mr. Trammell was awarded the contract to build, he said to hell with Elmira and went on about his way. He was supposed to build the new project over on the
Oh,
south
that must
side.
have been very frustrating.
It was. I remember meeting attorneys from New York at the airport and all that. It was really disgusting. And
What else was the NAACP involved in, either right before or during or after?
NAACP has always been involved in education.
Yeah.
We've always been involved in employment and housing. That was
Okay.
our main three sides. And our biggest problem is to try to get young people to come back and help others, but there's nothing here for them. So it made it very difficult. Very
Sure.
difficult. One of the things that we did do is as we're doing now, we bring young professional blacks who are from Elmira. We bring them back to talk on the Ernie Davis thing. Mr. Givens was brought back here for the NAACP annual dinner. He's a graduate of Mansfield. He's an attorney in Detroit now, and he did quite a job on that.
In Elmira, who have been the important people in having NAACP have an impact? Can you think of who the people were, in addition to yourself? And then I'm going to ask about what the particular projects were.
Let's see. Well, past presidents, Reverend McGee.
Uh-huh. When was he?
Right after I did.
Okay. Reverend McGee.
Yeah. Donald Blanford was before me.
Sure.
Trying to think. Trying to think who was. Let's see who followed Reverend McGee. Bessie Berry was president.
Uh-huh. She was a very active woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
George Bragg was one of the early presidents.
What? Think of a project in addition to the one on the construction.
Yeah.
That under your. But what specific project?
Housing.
Housing. Tell me how.
Housing and employment.
Okay. Let's go after employment first, if you wouldn't mind. Did NAACP specifically work to open up any?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's what our main thrust was, to open up. In fact, they at that time, 1975, they formed a affirmative action committee.
That's what I was
Yeah.
wondering. Okay. Which were the plants that you?
We're striking. We're geared to
Yeah.
all of them. In fact, all of them except the foundries. The foundries were very heavily populated with minorities, hard sweat work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did they before we leave the foundries? They really did have an awful lot of their employees
Black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. But then, what about in middle management?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. No.
Workers. Okay. Were you ever able to make any impact at all in the foundry?
Later down the line, that we're talking at 75. We're talking 80.
Yeah.
85. James Snowden was a supervisor
Okay.
on the Kennedy Valve, which is AT&T now. Leo Huey is a superintendent down there. Frank Givens was a time steady.
Frank Givens.
Yeah. Was time steady, and of course he's got a different, I guess he was an engineer or something, I don't know, but that was one of the few plants.
Was management ready for this, or did it? If you're working with people in the black community, it's amazing how personal contact opens up.
Yeah.
That's
one of the things that happened. Yeah, and I think they were ready. I don't know. They had a couple of night foremen there too that I found out later. Like I said, I used to work there.
Did you?
And it was hot, dirty,
Sure.
and I decided this ain't where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
But most of the fellows stuck right there. They retired. Quite a few retired from there.
Because they paid fairly well.
Paid fairly well, but it was It was job
Yeah,
security
yeah.
back in them days,
Yeah.
because it was most of them poured that hot iron, which white folks didn't want to do.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
and the GE was also until they
Heavy.
closed up the GE, but I think they might have had one or two black supervisors. I'm not quite sure.
Sure,
To going back.
All right, getting away from the foundries,
Yeah.
where else did you address trying to open up employment, and especially,
Yeah, all right. Up at Bendix
yeah,
Aviation. This is where George Bragg worked at. He was the first black machinist up there, and Bendix did some hiring.
that
Yeah.
was George
Bragg.
Bragg.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was working there as the first machinist.
Okay. How about commercially? Were you able to do anything with the retail establishments? With
We had two black people working downtown in stores.
is that right?
Yeah.
Well, we did better
Yeah,
than
but,
that.
yeah, but see, how bad we were. We had one black policeman. We had one black fireman. We had two black policemen. We had back in.
When are you talking? When you had one black policeman, one black fireman? About
We're
what
talking
year?
about from yesterday back down.
Gee, all right.
No, really. We had two. We had Wilbur Reed was a fireman.
Yeah.
Wilbur Reed was a policeman.
No, Wilbur was fine. Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wilbur was a policeman.
Yeah.
His brother Tommy was a fireman.
Okay.
But their father had a lot of influence back then too. That's
Okay.
Chick Reed he was the one that Mr. Reed was one that was very instrumental in getting young blacks jobs at Ingersoll. No, it wasn't Remington Rand.
Okay. Yeah.
Dad, their father. That's how they got into
What about other agencies in the city?
We had one that worked at the employment office. New York State Employment had one. That was Joseph Brown.
So, and that's
Star
still
Gazette,
today?
our paper, had two. Did they have two back then?
Elizabeth Green and
No, way back though. Yeah, all right, two. We had two.
Okay. At the
Star Gazette. They've done very well now. They've got about half a dozen or more they're working there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that there
There's
two
been a
used to
change.
be in the 70s, perhaps.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
And that now they're up to.
let's say maybe 6 or 8, maybe more. Yeah, put a
Okay.
question mark down there. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Sure.
Uh, Aetna Life Insurance, since they moved here, they've done a very good job. I have a very good relationship with them. They've got
Is
quite
it?
a few blacks,
Okay.
but no black salesmen. They don't have any black insurance. They have one. One.
Is there?
See, here's how they cop out, though.
Yeah.
They said none of them apply. Well, we feel very seriously about why apply if you don't see any. Why are they going to make an exception for me?
Sure.
And that's one of the things that really hurt the young people because this might be interesting. There was a special investigation back in 1969
Okay.
of the federal government. 1969
Yep.
of the federal government took a survey of Elmira, Ithaca, and Corning, and said there were no blacks working in the post office, and they wanted to know why. And we had a special program set up where me and my brother and a couple other fellows
Sure.
went out and recruited people. What they did was they set up a program that they're going to have a high-intensity training program
Yep.
on a Monday night from 7 to 10 on how to prepare yourself for the post office. We had a 5-week training program. When we started out, we had signed, it was talking about blacks and low-income people.
Yes.
We started out with 62 people we signed.
Who is we?
Me and my brother.
Is that right? Just took it on
yourself.
yourself.
Yeah, and then the NAACP,
Yeah.
worked together.
Yeah. Okay.
And we started out with 62 people had signed.
Yeah.
42 stuck with the program.
Yeah.
22 passed the exams.
Yeah.
Problem was you had to go to Rochester to get a job.
Couldn't they use the list for appointments in the area?
There was no openings at the time. So eight of the minorities went to Rochester, including my wife. 6 of them returned to Elmira, and 2 stayed right in Rochester.
Is that right?
And I had to fight. I had to fight for a year to get my wife back here.
To have her transferred?
Yeah. I had to go through my connection. That's when network was really booming.
Yeah.
I got in touch with a friend of mine from Urban League, and he got in touch with the postmaster. And next thing you know, I get a letter saying Ms. Coleman will be transferred. You know.
Yeah.
And it's very amazing, and you're probably aware of this more than anybody, that it's also important on who you know, along with what you know.
Absolutely. Takes both.
That's right.
Yeah.
One
you know,
precedes
who-
the other.
Who you know can open a door. What you know gets you to stay
Stay
there.
there. That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Mr. Coleman, you were had the connection to the Urban League as well.
Yes.
All right. Tell me a little bit about their activities. and-
Well, the Urban League, their work in Elmira, well, they didn't have any. They didn't set up one. Elmira never applied for Urban League.
Okay.
But my connection was in New York.
Okay.
Binghamton is the closest place for an Urban League program.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's very significant.
Yeah.
How did Binghamton feel about spending some effort down here in
I haven't had to ask them.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't. We've been. In fact, one of the things that's very people don't. If an Urban League is not in your town,
Yeah.
you have very little knowledge unless you read about what Urban League is all about. I have a book.
Is it?
How
Yeah.
long are you going to be here?
I'm leaving at 12:30. I gotta go home.
Oh, the reason why I say I have a book about Urban League and the Negroes in the '80s. I could see that you get that if you wanted to look through it.
If you give me the title, I'll read it.
Huh?
If you give me the title, I'll read it. We have a very active Urban League in
Well, they
Springfield.
can get it. They'll get it for you.
We have a very and
The Negroes in the '80s is the name of the book.
Okay. And as a matter of fact,
Oh, wait a
the
minute.
head of the Urban League in Springfield, Henry Thomas, he's a very close friend. So in the '80s.
Oh, wait a minute. There's
Yeah.
a girl from Elmira that used to work for Henry Thomas, and her name is Frankie Robinson's wife, young Frankie.
Is that right?
Yes. 'Cause she told me. I got her card home. She told me she worked with the Springfield everything.
Yeah. Well, they're very
Yeah.
active.
Oh, yes. Yes, they
Yeah.
are. They're-
Yeah. So
What do you think about Gray stepping down and taking that Van Diego College Fund job?
I really think that's great.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be good. He's effective. That man knows how to network.
but
and they
But you know what?
need-
You know what it proves to me?
Yeah.
That he's doing what he wants to do.
Yeah.
See, that's important. You know, I mean, he's not up there trying to impress anybody. He said, I got a family. And he said he's tired of all that pressure. You know.
And it allows him to focus just on
Oh,
the
yeah,
positive too.
Oh, yeah. He says
Yeah.
he's going to spend most of his time trying to help our new leaders. He's got it. You know, I admire the man. A lot of people don't. That's why I admired Martin Luther King.
Yeah. Tell me.
Because I had an opportunity to go down to the march on Washington.
Did you?
Oh,
You're
yeah.
talking 64, 65.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at the march, and I also was at his funeral.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And what?
Mr. Coleman, do you remember where you were when he died?
Yeah, I was here in Elmira,
Yeah.
but I went to Atlanta for a convention,
Yeah.
and we just closed down the thing for 4 days. We didn't have.
Would you tell me about it?
You
In other words, this is a very moving moment
Yeah.
in U.S.
What-
history.
yeah, okay. One of the things that was amazing is when I went to the march.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Washington.
No, I'm just shifting my feet here.
When I went to the march in Washington, I made national news because we were picked up from a contingent from Cornell. And as I was getting on the bus, I made a statement, the newspaper was there. I said, this makes a lot of sense. Here I am going to Washington so that we can ride anywhere we want on the bus. And I got to ride on the back of the bus. And how it was funny, at that time there was a convention in Boston. And my brother told me that he heard from the National Wire that it said Freedom Rider complains about being on the back of the bus. So I made national fame. I was very impressed in Washington, and I see people who were a lot older than me and still marching, going
Yeah.
in. And I said to myself, it's good that I'm a believer. I believe there's a God up above, and I said I thank the Lord the fact that King was not a militant man,
Yeah.
because had he have said, let's burn down Washington, they'd still be burying people. I mean, it's late.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, it's really wonderful that he has the compassion, that he loves people, not just black people, he works for people. And that was the most interesting part of my life.
Yeah.
And
By the way, King really had that vision.
I know.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that was amazing is that you had to be there to feel it. And I
Yeah.
said to myself, there was always, and there was never the feeling of fear of any problems,
Yeah.
you know. And the thing that shocked me, and it made me feel good, when I was at his funeral, when the lieutenant from the police force asked us to stand back on the curb
Yeah.
so that the parade, come by. And an old timer was standing next to him. He said, "Isn't that something?" He said, 10 years ago, he'd have hit you in your head. He talked about before King's
Sure.
movement. He said, you'd have been in trouble. But I like to take pictures. And I was so carried away, I never took a picture. And I was with the Hollywood contingent. I was with Jim Brown. I was with Marlon Brando. I was with all of them. And I never, I just didn't have the feeling to take out. And I loved, that's history that I'll never be able to recapture, but I was there. And But no, figure another thing about why I admired King and why I admire the Kennedys
Yeah.
is that these are people who could put themselves in a position to never hear another problem. They could have went up to Hyannis Sport and pushed the button and closed off and lived happily ever after. They sacrificed their lives, and every time they do something, they go to the bathroom. It's public. That kind of punishment. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
That's why I say I admire King. I remember was offered a big job with General Motors for public
Sure.
relations. He turned it down. People don't turn down big money. See, coaches leave pro football for broadcasting for money. Money. That's why I say I had to admire people like that.
What how did King's movement and how did his assassination affect what you were doing in the
ACP.
Yeah.
There was at that time we were dealing with the Young Turks,
Yeah.
and they were the kind of militancy that take what you want. You don't mind that bullshit about waiting. We done waited too long. If not now, why not now?
Yeah.
And it was a difficult
Not
situation.
now,
Yeah.
when?
And it was difficult situation to keep the long hot summers cool down
Sure.
too. And we had to work with them. And the amazing part, the fellow that we're talking about was one of the leaders of the militancy, is Robinson, who lives in Springfield.
Is that right?
Frankie Robinson. Yeah.
I know Frankie
Right?
Robinson.
You know Frankie Robinson?
I don't know if it's the same one, but I sure know
He's
him.
with the Department of Health or something. He's got a...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my main man. He lives here. He's from Elmira. Yeah.
Rather tall fellow.
Well, he's big, yeah. I might be the same guy,
Yeah.
Frankie. He had a daughter or son that got drowned in the swimming pool about 2 years ago.
Wasn't aware.
Yeah, this was a son or a daughter. I'm not quite sure. The baby. And
Oh, that must have been tough.
yeah.
Well, let me take you back to how did King's assassination. You were talking about the Young Turks.
Yeah,
and having to put things into account.
It made him very bitter.
Yeah.
It made for a couple of years long hot summers, and we did all we could is to keep it down, And we had to work with the chief of police. We had to work with the fire department. There was a lot of agitation about burning down Elmira and all that. And it was very interesting that when one thinks, or is anticipating trouble, one can get very friendly with whoever.
Yeah.
Everyone becomes your brother then. And we, I had to, I could see that coming. And what had happened is we were able to keep a lid on. Many a time we were out there in the streets trying to keep the young.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult, but we did. We tried to talk them. I was called Uncle Tom and House Nigger and all that, from my own
Sure.
people. And I was able to weather it. And one of the things that made it very interesting is that the same individuals that Robbie was right there with him, leading the group, and that Uncle Tom and all that. And then later on, the period of 5, 6, 7, 8 years passed, and these fellows become college guys, and they were going through the same problem. I never forget the fact that young Gilliam, a hell of an athlete, was calling me Uncle Tom and House Nigger, and and then later on he was a student at Buffalo, and that he didn't want to join the militant
sure,
black because he
they
wanted
had a one hell of
that's right,
a
and he wanted to get an education, and so he was. They had a special meeting here one night. And they called me in, and they said, "Mr. Coleman, what should we do?" I said, "What seems to be the problem?" We met with the coach and the mayor and everybody. Gilliam transferred to Brockport, which I believe was a bad move now because he had a shot for the NBA at
Did
the
he?
Peter State of Buffalo, and DeGorio is the one that he,
Sure. The coach.
yeah, no, but the one that he played against. What's the kid's name? That the young DeGorio, that fella from Buffalo that went to the pro. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were on par at the time, but he could outshoot him. But anyway, one of the moves that were made that you had to pay the price.
Yeah.
But the thing is that you have to be very strong and believe in what you're doing in order to stick in there. Because what happens today is a lot of young people are figuring out a way why they won't want to do something. When you tell them about a job, they want to know how much does it pay. When you tell them how much you pay, they want to know where is it at. When you tell them where it's at, they want to know what shift I'll be working. And then I have gotten to the point where 2 years ago there was a job with the post office.
Yeah.
Now the job was paying like $9 an hour to start. The job was located 25 and 30 miles from Elmira, Penn Yan, Watkins Glen, and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I told one of the young ladies there, and she said, "How am I going to get there?" And my first words were, "I don't give a goddamn." And my next words were, "Work a week and buy a car." At $9 an hour, the buses go there. Ride the bus.
Sure.
And but nothing happened. They didn't do anything. Oh, I didn't forget to talk about the post office thing.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
End of the day, 6 of the people came back to Elmira, and they're working now in
In the Elmira post
yeah,
office.
post office. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my wife is one of them, and there's one supervisor there, and there's
So the federal government, at least.
yeah, but there hasn't
Yeah.
been any more hired, since there's been no new blacks. Now, an interesting thing that you might like. I was in my brother runs a jazz club.
Sure.
Green Packard.
Okay.
And I'm in there one
My
night.
regret was I didn't have. I found out about it too late.
Well, what the important thing, interesting thing was I was in there one night and a fella come over and says, "Coleman, you're a lot of bullshit." And the white's going, "Who is this guy here?" He says, "No," he says, "I hear about you." He said, "You're a lot of bullshit." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I don't even know you." He said, "Well, you're going to know me, I guess." I figured this might be a little trip outside here. This guy sounds, but he said, "You're hollering about the NAACP and all that. You have had 2 black postmasters working here, 1 woman and 1 man, for 2 years apiece. And they didn't hire 1 black, so don't tell me that bullshit." And he was right.
Uh-huh.
He was right. And they hadn't. They hired 1 guy and he stayed, but he left. But what I'm saying is that, and he's made it very clear, he says, "I'm Irish. And if you think I wasn't over there, my Irish lads would be right over there with me," which is a point.
Yeah, but that speaks of an awareness
Yeah.
of a process
Yeah.
that's awfully healthy.
Yeah, and the thing about it, what made it amazing is he lived out next door to the lady postmaster,
Ah.
see? And he told me, because he was, first thing about it is that when you bring a black postmaster, one of the problems, and people hate to admit it, is that white folks have never had black bosses.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard for them to deal with it because they think that they're going to get even now. And then when they finally wait and find out that the guy is trying to do a job, then their whole concept is different. And it's really amazing. And a lot of people fear the fact that he's going to get even. And the majority of
One of the things that has changed is the military service.
Yeah.
Military service in very important aspect of you're talking life and death,
Yeah.
has made whites appreciate the quality of black.
But you also have to understand this too. At one time, there was 37% of the armed forces was blacks.
Yeah.
Now, if you stop and think about it, in the last 5 years, they've been mustering out a lot of guys.
I don't know what
No.
the percentage is.
No, I mean it was 37%. But what I'm saying is a lot of fellows with 14 years and 16 years who couldn't pass the physical or couldn't do this or couldn't do that. See, at one time, the service was a hiding place.
Yeah.
Not hiding, but a convenient spot to go to upgrade yourself and have a decent living. Now, they want the degree, they want this, they want that. Now, another thing is the same thing with corrections. And the same thing with the
By the way, would you talk a little bit about that? How did you were with the correction
Yeah.
service? How did you get involved? How did you get that employment?
I took a civil service exam. In fact, I don't mind admitting it, I took it twice.
Yeah.
The interesting part was I was working at Bendix Aviation for it both times. I took it in 1954,
Yeah.
and they weren't hiring minorities back then. A friend of mine, who's passed on, was the first black state trooper in New York State, and he took the guard exam and he passed. He says, I think they're opening the door now. I said, I don't want to be no damn guard. So I took it anyway, and all of a sudden I worked the same job I worked before I took it to the dinner the second time, and all of a sudden I picked up experience, you know. And I knew what the deal was. Same test, passed the same way, and I didn't have enough experience. Anyway, I accepted the job.
This was back when.
1952, and then
Okay.
I passed in 1950. Yeah, 1952. Then I took it again 1956
Okay.
because I got the appointment in 57.
All right. In '57, what percentage of the prison population was black?
At 57, I think it was probably 40 or 42% black.
Yeah.
You're talking about the inmates.
Yeah.
You're talking about the workers. No.
I'm not talking the inmates.
Yeah, and then I seen it change.
That's what I wanted you
Yeah.
to talk
I
about.
seen it change, and then it changed. It did a complete flip flop because of, well, the movements and the crime in the streets and the dope and everything. Because it was very interesting that back then, I was the first black correctional officer in Auburn prison, and back then it was separate and not equal, separate.
Yeah.
Black inmates weren't allowed to talk to white inmates.
Well, did they have separate wards? Did they?
No,
Have
they
wards or anything?
were the whites had the best jobs, clerks, feed up men, nurses, stuff like that. The blacks had maintenance, mopping the floors, the coal gang. All prisons had coal gang where they had to go out and shovel coal. They didn't have to before they got the gas furnace, and they used to go out with the big shovels and all that, clean up detail and all that. And in the mess hall, which I thought was very strange of us being so domesticated, that we'd be at least cooking the food. All we did was wash around the thing. And I was one of the ones that changed that in Auburn. You know,
Yeah.
it was a tough fight, but one of the things you might appreciate is that when I was working in Auburn, my welcome thing was, nigger go home. And this wasn't put up by no inmate, you know.
This is
The sign on the wall, you know. And the thing that I was telling the others,
What kind of help did you get from administration, from warden? Or,
the warden was probably one of the biggest rednecks in the world.
Yes.
And he didn't seem to think that we were ready for a black officer, because he was the type of fellow who didn't speak to the enlisted man. And I had a chance to reverse a situation that I told the fellows that I was talking to, I said, I don't know about you guys, but Big Murph is going to speak to me. Well, who the hell do you think you are? He don't speak. I said, he's going to speak to me. So what happened, they didn't know the details, but when Murph come up, he said, how are you, Mr. Coleman? I said, fine, how are you? He tried to make it look like I was his flunky.
Uh-huh.
And I reversed the situation, saying I got contact in Albany, and every day that I'm here, he better speak to me. And it was funny because I was living with the fellow who was a brother. They called it SCAD back then. That was it was human relations, but it was called what the heck was it? Society Against Discrimination, something like that. They had a name like I found the name. The lady's name was Sophie Divers. I found her name in it. But anyway, the fellow in Albany, his brother was who I was living with, and I told the warden that I was going to get in touch with my man there. And then the warden got very there, but he tried to change the situation.
I see.
And it was very difficult. See, back in them days, you couldn't talk to they used to have on the
You couldn't talk to the inmates?
No, you weren't supposed to talk to you're not a consul, you're not this. And inmates couldn't, they had a big, on the holidays, 4th of July, Labor Day, they gave free ice. Inmates were allowed to make Kool-Aid and have a little picnic. They had white ice and black ice. Inmates weren't allowed to integrate. There was no integration in prison. You were white, you stayed over there. They couldn't play basketball together. And when I left, they were doing everything. I asked a
Yeah.
question. I said, why? It's another thing. This everybody. You asked a very important question. What kind of cooperation will you get from the administration? The administration feels the same way. So how can you get cooperation? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. How did you take them on? How did you get the shift?
Uh, I how it opened up was in the mess hall one day. They call it refusing to eat bread.
Sure.
Anything that black inmates touch,
Uh-huh.
they wouldn't touch it. What happened is we used to have bread chutes, which your loaf of bread comes down. Now, out of every inmate, we lose 2 slices because they wouldn't touch the first one and the last one. You know, they pick it out and they throw it away. Anyway, I seen this going on. I seen the sergeants and all of them sitting there and watching it. And I'm saying to myself, this doesn't make sense. And they would take their plate. And the guy says, the sergeant said, what's the matter with me? I said, why don't we take care of it? He said, what do you mean? I said, there's a way of solving this problem. I said, what do you mean? I said, put blacks on everything. That's all. Just pass out everything. See how long it takes. 2 days they were eating everything. But if the administration doesn't care, how the hell are you going to solve a problem?
Yeah.
But
That
they
was
oh yeah, but they hate to admit they're wrong. You know that yourself. In your travels, you know that they don't want to admit. You know.
I don't care where you go.
Yeah,
People
that's
don't
right.
wanna go.
That's right. But I mean, I'm talking about preventing trouble.
Yeah.
I'm talking about what they don't understand. Prison is not like Boy Scout camp. You'll get hurt in there.
What was your relation with the prisoners, both white and black?
It's amazing because the word got out that Coleman is tough, but he's fair. And I didn't have the trouble that a lot of other people had. Now, one of the important things is that back in them days, you weren't allowed to talk to inmates, okay? And what happened was a young white inmate was talking to me about football. You know, gradually I'd carry on a conversation. If the brass come, he said, what's the matter? He asked me about it. He's got a headache or something, you know. So anyway, he was telling me about Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle. I said, don't do this to yourself, son. I said, Willie is the greatest. And so he said, hey, I don't want to hear that. Just in conversation. So
Yeah.
a couple of black inmates heard him. And they thought that he was giving me a hard time. So they went around, they got the guys together. They come back and told me, said, Mr. Coleman, about 2 o'clock, I want you to tell the sergeant you want to go to the bathroom. I said, what are you talking about? He says, I heard that hunky. I said, oh, wait a minute. I said, no, you're way off. I said, no, he wasn't this. He said, no, Mr. Coleman, I heard him. I said, no. I said, we'll go ask him. So they went. And he come back and said, thank you, Mr. Coleman. He said, man, them guys don't understand. He said, I ain't going to talk to you no more. But it was a tough situation, see,
Yeah.
because that was how, you know, and what happened was, the thing that really got me, I was ready to leave. I was going to quit. I said, I can't handle this. A guy come up to me, which I'm 64 now, which I thought was old then. When I was 30, he had me by the pant leg,
Yeah.
and he did like that. And he started crying. He said, I prayed for the day I'd see a black officer. And I said, wait a minute, man, take it easy. I said, geez, I said, don't do that. And I choked up. And I can't handle seeing a man cry. You know what I mean? Out of pain and suffering. So I called my wife and I said, I'll be home. I said, I can't handle this. I said, geez, I can't go for this route. Then I thought about it. When the man said, I prayed for the day that I'd see one of us here, I said, maybe I better stick around. So what I did was, I stuck around, and one of the fellows that I tutored, he's a superintendent now.
Is that right?
Yeah, one of the fellows I talked into going in and raised hell with him and give him the devil. He's a superintendent now up near Auburn. And right today, I feel very good because I asked a girl over the weekend, and she said there's about 6 or 7 black officers up there. And I was the only one for 2 years.
I should think it would make a hell
Yeah,
of a difference.
it does. And the thing about it is this now, we must understand this too. Everybody that's black is not black, okay? We have a lot of problems with those who look black and act white and don't want to talk about it, okay? So what I'm saying is that there are a lot of officers who don't want to be involved, who don't want to be concerned. So therefore, you know, because the fellow has black skin, that doesn't mean he's...
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really something.
Before we bring the interview to a close, very interested in your networking. Who else? Is this something you do exclusively?
Myself.
Is that right?
Yeah, all by myself. I don't have any. I mean, locally, in fact, I have a relationship with several employment places.
Yeah.
I call them, they call me. For instance, it's a very difficult thing to help people, okay? And it's twice as tough to help your own, okay? Now, I don't receive any money for this. This is all, it costs me money, but I don't mind it. What I mean by that is that sometimes I make phone calls. I'll call New York or something like that. But it's rewarding because you can do something. But the thing is, what bothers me is, my biggest thing is that I want them, who I help, to help somebody else. That's all. Yeah, and they won't do it.
Mr. Coleman, this has been really very interesting. I want to thank you.
Yes, I enjoy
It's
it.
been a pleasure.
I want you to look up Robinson now.
All right.